Now, we've been talking about the state of the accident and emergency department at University Hospital Limerick over the past number of days. There's a protest taking place there today, and the Health Minister is due to visit again later. And lots of you have been sending me emails over the past 48 hours just detailing your own experiences at UHL. Teri is one of those. Teri is with us on the line today because, Teri, you sent in an email. I know you lost your mum back in October, and I'm sorry for your loss. Will you just tell us a little bit about your mum's experience, Teri?
Hi, Andrea. Thanks for listening. On the 4th of October, 6 months ago today actually, Mum was brought by ambulance to the A&E department in UHL. We arrived there at about 7 o'clock in the evening. When we got to the hospital, there was no room for them to actually bring Mum through. So the ambulance driver, it was a bit like the scene from An Officer and a Gentleman. He picked Mum up and carried her in his arms to a trolley. The place was absolutely jammers. It's something I personally will never forget. Now, my mum was, she'd had a heart attack. She was in heart failure. Her lungs were filling with fluid. The ambulance had put her on oxygen. So thank God she wasn't fully aware of everything that was going on. Because if she was, I know she would have been screaming to get out of there. And if I could have taken her out of there, I would. But that's the problem. You've no choice. You know, when somebody is that sick, you just have to take a chance and stay there. Andrea, what I saw and what I heard and the smells will stay with me forever, I think. I drive past there and I bless myself and I just say, please God, that nobody that I know will ever have to face in there again. It was absolutely horrendous. Mom was put in a corridor. As the girls, Michelle and Sharon yesterday, kind of summed up the experience. Mom was on corridor C. Now, can I just say as well, Andrea, I have no issue with the staff. They were amazing. They are heroes in my eyes. What they are living through and putting up with every day is absolute hell. I went out for one break because a friend of mine came in and stayed with Mum, and I did not want to go back in. How they walk in there every day and start working in those conditions, it is just beyond me.
Do you know, that's the thing that has struck me, Teri, over the past 2 days, since we've been talking about this here now in the show, you know, since Tuesday. And that is the thing that has struck me. Like, as a staff member, and it is a tough job. Anybody who knows anybody in working in any element of the health service, it is a really, really difficult and a hard and a tough slog going in to do your shift. And then to go in and work in an environment that is overcrowded, understaffed, people exhausted, and then just the scene that you've described of your mum, you know, being physically carried through the corridor of the hospital where trolleys can't pass, people, you know, piled up basically on trolleys. And it must be just exceptionally difficult for the staff working there.
On that evening, there were trolleys actually, and like they said yesterday, lined up like cars all along the sides of the corridors. They were lined up on both sides, which meant for the staff to even get to patients, they had to actually sidestep. They were sidestepping up and down the corridor, and one had to stand at the end of the corridor and wait for the other person. They literally couldn't get through. And one of the issues I had, I felt guilty because I felt I was in the way. But on the other hand, there was absolutely no way I was leaving Mum there on her own. Now, there were patients there on their own, and Andrea, there was a woman, I can still hear her, and she was crying and crying, please, please, somebody help me. Somebody let me go to the toilet. And I felt like going over and helping her, but needless to say, you can't do that. There was a man beside me that kept asking, and eventually he was brought into a cubicle with the door open, put on a commode, and next thing, the smell that emanated from the cubicle, we could all get it. where I was standing, there was a man on a trolley to my left. His feet were literally touching my shoulder. I was kind of afraid to move. So that was on my left. On my right, the man was lying with, we'll say, his back to me. But his gown had opened and everything was there visible. He, God love him, urinated himself. There were people getting sick into little cardboard bowls. It was just unbelievable. There was 2 cubicles then, and the doors of those cubicles were open. Now, the trolleys were lined up outside the cubicles, and there was a tiny gap, to get in and out. Now, as the night went on, it transpired that those 2 cubicles were patients with COVID, because 2 people or staff arrived in full PPE and they were whisked out. But within seconds of a turnaround, they were cleaned. But those doors had been open all night while we were there. So I was like, oh my God, it was just wide open to infection. We spent 12 hours there. Now, if I hadn't been with Mom, she didn't get water, neither did I didn't see anybody around her getting anything like that. Now, my dad was there 4 years ago. And God love him, he has passed since as well. The situation was the exact same when I was there with Dad, only worse, that there were even more people. Now, in Dad's situation, I could carry him to the bathroom myself, but there were so many elderly people there who couldn't move and ended up having to stay there soiling themselves. It was just horrendous. During the night, a young man came over to me and he said, listen, I've been here 4 days. I can get you a stool, but make sure you return it to the station, the nurse's station, by the morning. I felt guilty taking the stool because there were so many other people around me that had been standing all night as well. Mom, after about 12 hours, was moved into resus. Her trolley was left in the middle of the ward, men and women again all around, and somebody came in to insert a catheter. And luckily, a nurse came along and she said, for God's sake, would you give that woman some dignity and put her in a cubicle? They did put her into, it wasn't a closed-in cubicle, the ones with the curtains, but the curtain wasn't even closed, and I could hear my mother crying in pain. It was just absolutely, I'll never forget it. No. She eventually, we were told then that morning that she was in heart failure and was going to pass away, and she was moved to a ward and passed away on the Saturday. But my thing is, my mother's last few hours were absolutely horrendous. She was a tiny little woman. She was 6 stone weight. And for her to end her days like that, and my dad, in fact, to have to go through those experiences, I will never, ever, ever forget it as long as I live.
It'll stay with you, Teri. I mean, the picture that you've described today, like, and it's terrible to say you've described it so well, but given what you've been through with your mum and dad and your experiences there, but it's terrible. Like it is terrible.
Yeah.
And it's the lack of dignity and privacy and just respect.
Oh, that was like, I completely understand that the staff are overwhelmed. I know that, but surely to God there has to be some alternative to this. I mean, it was like third world conditions. I have friends with elderly parents. We're all at that age now. And I am advising every one of them, go to Dublin, go to Cork, go to Galway. Do not go out there.
Which is sort of madness, really, isn't it? Then I can understand completely, by the way, why you would give that advice. But it's a sort of a mad situation that we'd have, that people would say to people locally, just bypass your own hospital and go straight to the capital.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I could have, that's what I would have done on the night. Only, obviously, your hands are tied.
I know.
And when you're in that situation, you're desperate, like you're trapped. I couldn't leave. I couldn't bring Mama out. But I knew, now, luckily, she was seen the following day. But I have, like, my friend who looked after her while I took the break, his dad was there for 4 or 5 days. And his experience was the very same.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, like, and the health minister, there's, obviously politicians down in Limerick yesterday. Sure, it's not the first time we've talked about this. I mean, there was only a couple of months back, I think we were talking about a protest in Limerick here on the show. Sure, it's an ongoing issue. To listen to your own experience, Teri, you were there with your dad 4 years ago. You're back 7 months ago with your mum, and I've been talking to callers here on the programme, Michelle and Sharon as well on Tuesday, who have been talking about their own very recent experiences. So I don't know surely with all of the brains in the country and people working in various different sections and elements of the health service, you'd imagine somebody would come up or could come up with some form of a plan to try and address the issues there in the interim. Like it just to me seems like complete madness.
That's why, I mean, I wouldn't normally write into a programme or contact somebody. I know. But somebody somewhere has to listen and somebody has to help, because it's gone beyond ridiculous. And I just feel so sorry for the people who are out there today. My heart breaks for them.